The silence of the night was shattered by Temi's anguished cry as she stumbled through the dimly lit streets of Kofi, carrying a big open bag of money. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her breath came in ragged gasps. The money was supposed to save her son's education, but the price she paid for them left her feeling hollow and defeated. Kofi was a vibrant village situated by the Great Zambezi River. Its markets were always bustling, and its streets were lined with colorful stalls and lively chatter. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect place lay secrets and troubles that few knew of. Temi and her husband Chuka lived on the outskirts of Kofi, where their once grand house now stood as a mere shadow of its former self. Chuka had been born into wealth. His family owned vast lands and had influence over many villagers. However, unlike his hardworking ancestors, Chuka lacked ambition. He squandered their fortune on idle pleasures and failed to manage their estates wisely. When his parents passed away, he sold off their lands and riches, hoping for a miracle that never came. Now, Chuka was known as a lazy man, preferring to lounge around the house rather than seek work. His indifference to the family's plight was evident, and he relied heavily on Temi's modest fish business to keep them afloat. Despite their financial struggles, Temi remained devoted to her husband, hoping that his fortunes would turn around. One morning, as Temi prepared for her day at the market, she was greeted by the troubling news that their son, Didi, had been expelled from school for non-payment of fees. The heartache Temi felt was compounded by Chuka's dismissive attitude towards the problem. He suggested sending Didi to learn a trade elsewhere, showing no regard for his education. Desperate to find a solution, Temi went to seek help from her friends in the market. Her walk through the bustling streets was marked by the attention she drew from the village men. They ogled at her and made inappropriate remarks, ignoring her clear discomfort. Temi, though frustrated, kept her focus on finding a way to secure the money needed for Kofi's education. Her path crossed with Juma, a wealthy trader with a dubious reputation. Juma had long been interested in Temi, and when he saw her distress, he saw an opportunity to fulfill his desires. He approached her with a seemingly generous offer. He would pay the school fees if Temi agreed to spend time with him. Faced with no other options, Temi reluctantly accepted his proposal. As Temi left Juma's grand house with a bag of money, she was consumed by a mixture of relief and guilt. The weight of the money felt like a burden, and she knew that she had made a deal that could have serious consequences. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden realization: Chuka had seen her entering Juma's mansion. Chuka, having followed Temi out of curiosity, witnessed her leaving with the pouch of money. His anger was palpable, and he was filled with thoughts of betrayal. He began to devise a plan, seeing an opportunity to turn Temi's situation to his advantage. Chuka approached Temi later that evening, pretending to be oblivious to the events of the day. He let her carry on with her activities, though he could see the unease in her demeanor. That night, as Didi slept peacefully, Chuka shared his plan with Temi. He proposed that she continue to engage with the village men and charge them for her company. He threatened her with exposure if she refused to comply. Temi was horrified by Chuka's proposal. The thought of continuing to sell her company for money was repugnant to her, but Chuka's threats left her with little choice. Reluctantly, Temi agreed to his plan, knowing that her options were limited. The next day, Temi's attire changed dramatically. She began dressing provocatively, drawing attention from the men of Kofi. Her every movement seemed to captivate those around her, and Chuka took advantage of this newfound attention. He organized lavish feasts and gatherings, using these events to attract more clients for Temi's services. Despite the growing wealth, Temi struggled with the moral implications of her new role. Her once thriving fish business took a backseat as she devoted more time to her new venture. The money came in abundance, and Chuka's plan seemed to be working perfectly. They used the profits to renovate their home, provide a better education for Didi, and improve their lifestyle. However, the consequences of their actions began to take a toll. Temi started feeling unwell, experiencing severe headaches and a general sense of fatigue. Chuka, concerned about the impact on their business, took Temi to the local pharmacy. The pharmacist suggested a visit to the clinic for further examination. At the clinic, the doctor's diagnosis was a crushing blow. Temi and Chuka were both suffering from a severe illness. The realization of their actions and the toll it had taken on their health was devastating. Their world, once filled with newfound wealth and prosperity, was now overshadowed by regret and sorrow. The disease began to ravage their bodies and drain their finances. The once grand plans for wealth and success turned to ashes. The villagers, who had once admired their prosperity, now looked upon them with pity and disdain. The story of Chuka and Temi became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of greed and deceit. As their health continued to deteriorate, the impact of their choices became evident. The disease spread among their clients, causing widespread suffering and breaking apart families. The tale of Chuka and Temi served as a powerful lesson in Kofi, a reminder of the dangers of pursuing wealth through deceit and vice. Temi's health continued to deteriorate as the weeks passed. Her once bright eyes were now dull, and her steps were heavy with fatigue. Each day was a struggle, and she found it increasingly difficult to maintain the facade of normalcy for the sake of their business. Chuka, too, felt the weight of their situation, though he masked his anxiety behind a veneer of calm. The villagers, who once admired Chuka and Temi's success, now whispered about them behind closed doors. The couple's dramatic change in lifestyle and Temi's sudden decline in health became the talk of Kofi. While some pitied them, others were quick to judge, attributing their misfortune to their own actions and moral failings. Chuka, ever the opportunist, tried to keep their secret hidden, but the strain was showing. The lavish gatherings that had once been a source of income now felt like a cruel reminder of their predicament. The feasts were no longer filled with the joyous chatter of wealthy men but with the silent tension of their own troubled hearts. Temi spent most of her days in bed, her strength waning. Chuka tried to maintain a semblance of their former grandeur, but his efforts were in vain. The illness took its toll, both physically and financially. The once expansive house they had renovated now seemed oppressive, filled with echoes of their past ambitions and current regrets. One day, as Temi lay in bed, a visit from a new client turned out to be a turning point. The client was a well-known businessman from a neighboring town who had heard rumors of Temi's services. He approached Chuka with a hefty offer, hoping to secure a private engagement with Temi. Chuka, desperate for money, agreed to the terms, but Temi was overcome with dread. The meeting between Temi and the client was awkward and uncomfortable. She felt like a puppet in a play she never wanted to be part of. The client's advances were more intense than those she had experienced before, and Temi struggled to maintain her composure. She felt trapped between her duty to her family and her own sense of dignity. Meanwhile, Chuka's behavior became increasingly erratic. He was more aggressive in his dealings, trying to secure as much money as possible before their situation worsened. His once charismatic personality had transformed into something darker, driven by greed and desperation. Temi tried to reason with him, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The stress of their situation began to take a toll on their relationship. Temi and Chuka grew distant, each consumed by their own fears and regrets. Their once solid marriage was now strained, and the love they had shared seemed like a distant memory. Their home, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt cold and unwelcoming. The turning point came when Temi received a letter from Didi's school, informing her that the school fees had not been paid for several months. The letter was a harsh reminder of the promises they had made to their son and the sacrifices they had made. Temi felt a pang of guilt and sadness, realizing that their actions had not only affected their own lives but also the future of their child. Chuka's attempts to regain control of their situation were met with resistance. The illness was taking a toll on their finances, and the money they had accumulated was quickly running out. The once promising business venture was now a source of despair, and their attempts to salvage their situation seemed futile. Temi's health continued to decline, and she began to experience more severe symptoms. The doctor's visits became more frequent, and the medication seemed to have little effect. Temi's condition was a constant source of worry for Chuka, who felt helpless and frustrated. The couple's dreams of wealth and success were now replaced with the harsh reality of their declining health. As their situation grew more dire, Temi and Chuka faced the harsh consequences of their choices. The once bustling markets of Kofi now seemed distant and indifferent to their plight. The people who had once admired them now avoided them, and the isolation was palpable. Temi's friends, who had once been supportive, now kept their distance. They had heard rumors of Temi's involvement with the village men and were reluctant to associate with her. The judgment and whispers added to Temi's sense of isolation and despair. In an attempt to find solace, Temi reached out to her family, whom she had distanced herself from in her pursuit of wealth. Her family, though initially hesitant, offered their support and comfort. They provided a sense of stability and a reminder of the values Temi had once held dear. Chuka, faced with the reality of their situation, began to reflect on his actions. He realized that his greed and laziness had led them down a path of destruction. The wealth he had once sought now seemed meaningless in the face of their suffering. The couple's relationship, though strained, was not entirely beyond repair. Temi and Chuka began to reconnect on a deeper level, sharing their fears and regrets. They sought solace in each other's company and found moments of tenderness amidst their struggles. As their health continued to deteriorate, Temi and Chuka faced the harsh reality of their situation. The once vibrant village of Kofi now seemed like a distant memory, and their dreams of success were replaced with the harsh truth of their choices. Their story became a cautionary tale in Kofi, a reminder of the consequences of greed and deceit. The village, once bustling with life and activity, now bore witness to the struggles and regrets of a couple whose pursuit of wealth had led them astray.